We believe we had the full Shedeur Sanders draft story. Turns out, we only knew a fraction of it. Cam Newton just revealed a bombshell that changes everything regarding Sanders' drop to the 5th round.
Tells me that it wasn't just the Baltimore Ravens. It was 3 teams: the Cleveland Browns, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it also was Baltimore.
Apparently, it wasn't solely about one team. There's an entire other layer to the story with unexpected twists. Let's unpack what actually happened. The revelation that shook the NFL. On September 17th, 2025, former NFL MVP Cam Newton dropped a massive bombshell on his 4th and 1 podcast that stunned football fans everywhere. In one of the most revealing interviews in recent sports media, Newton didn't just confirm the shocking news about Shedeur Sanders turning down the Baltimore Ravens. He completely rewrote the story by disclosing that Sanders had actually declined not 1, but 3 teams on the same day of the 2025 NFL Draft. According to Newton's unnamed source, the situation involved not just the Ravens, but also the Philadelphia Eagles and eventually the Cleveland Browns.
My source tells me that it wasn't just the Baltimore Ravens. It was 3 teams: the Cleveland Browns, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it also was Baltimore Ravens.
To understand the unprecedented nature of this revelation, consider this: a 5th round draft pick, a player who had tumbled dramatically from a projected top 10 position, somehow wielding leverage usually reserved for seasoned superstars. The boldness of it is remarkable, and the consequences for our understanding of player empowerment in today's NFL are huge. To truly grasp this story, we must look at the context leading up to it. Shedeur Sanders entered the 2025 NFL Draft as one of college football's brightest talents, projected as a top 10 pick after a stellar career at Jackson State in Colorado, compiling over 10,000 passing yards, 99 touchdowns, and a 69.3% completion rate. Yet, as we now know, his draft experience was anything but ordinary. The story began unfolding days earlier, when ESPN's Adam Schar dropped his own bombshell. On September 14, 2025, Schar reported that the Baltimore Ravens were planning to take Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round with the 141st overall pick. However, Sanders' camp made it clear he preferred not to back up Lamar Jackson. This initial report was already astonishing, considering the organization's renowned quarterback development and respected coaching staff. But 3 days later, Newton's revelation completely upended our understanding of what occurred on that April 26th draft day. The scale of Sanders' draft day maneuvering was far bigger than anyone imagined, with all 3 teams targeting picks between 141 and 150. What makes this story even more compelling is Newton framing it as a rebuttal to incomplete reporting from mainstream media. He argued that partial coverage fundamentally misrepresented the truth.
Of the truth, and not all of the truth. You are, in some cases, if not all cases, just as guilty as telling a lie. Because if you only have a certain amount of information that you're pulling from, it clouds your perspective.
This wasn't just about correcting the record. It was about
This wasn't merely about setting the record straight. It was about holding the media accountable for what Newton saw as a fundamental misrepresentation of Sanders' character and intentions. The former MVP essentially argued that by only highlighting the Ravens' angle, the media was unintentionally portraying Sanders as someone simply too good for Baltimore, when the reality was far more layered and, frankly, respectful. The timing of Newton's revelation was also key. His 4th and 1 podcast episode titled Cam Finishes Gilly, Shedur's 5th round reality, and Joe Flacco stinks aired on September 17, 2025, and within 72 hours, the Sanders segment had garnered over 1.22 million views across X, Instagram, and TikTok. The viral response shows just how eager the football world was for the full story behind one of the draft's most shocking slides. But here's where it gets even more compelling. Newton didn't just disclose the additional teams. He provided context that completely reframed Sanders' decision-making. Rather than portray him as an entitled player making demands, Newton depicted a young man demonstrating remarkable respect for established stars while making calculated business decisions for his career. According to Newton's source, Sanders had deep respect for both Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, recognizing that meaningful playing time would depend on opportunities arising from elite quarterbacks being sidelined.
Jalen Hurts, and he would be in a situation where he would have needed that individual in Lamar and Jalen to get hurt in order for him.
This perspective is essential because it shifts the story from arrogance to strategic thinking. We're not talking about a player thinking he was too good for certain teams. We're talking about someone aware that his path to significant playing time would vary dramatically depending on his landing spot. The Ravens' angle makes sense when considering Lamar Jackson's status. At just 28 years old, Jackson is a two-time MVP in his prime, having completed the 2024 season with over 4,500 passing yards and 35 touchdowns. The Ravens' quarterback room was solid, with Jackson locked in as the franchise QB through 2027 and performing at MVP levels. For a young quarterback aiming to grow and eventually compete for a starting role, backing up Jackson could have meant years on the sidelines with minimal game exposure. The Eagles situation, though less confirmed by mainstream media, followed a similar logic. Jalen Hurts was locked in through a 5-year, $255 million extension signed in 2023 and had just finished the 2024 season with 3,900 passing yards, 28 TDs, 8 INTs, and 600 rushing yards. At 26 years old, Hurts was entering his prime with no indication that the Eagles planned to replace him soon. This brings us to a key point that Newton repeatedly stressed. Not every financial opportunity equals the best career move.
All money ain't good money, and every opportunity is not really a great opportunity for where you are or what your vision is.
This philosophy represents a significant
This mindset represents a major shift in thinking about player development and career management in the NFL. Traditionally, young players, especially late-round picks, are expected to be grateful for any chance and pay their dues, regardless of circumstances. But Sanders and his camp followed a different philosophy, prioritizing long-term career growth over short-term stability. The social media reaction to Newton's revelation was immediate and polarizing. Within 72 hours, the story generated over 40,000 posts with hashtags like #ShedurSnubs and #BusinessDecision. Reactions were split. Some fans admired Sanders' agency and business acumen, while others saw his actions as entitled or short-sighted. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it highlights shifting power dynamics in today's NFL. A new generation of players is increasingly willing to control their own narratives and career paths, even if it involves risk. Sanders could have easily joined either the Ravens or Eagles, learned from elite quarterbacks, and developed within stable, successful organizations. Instead, he chose uncertainty with Cleveland, betting on his ability to compete and eventually secure a starting role. Newton emphasized that sometimes the best decision for yourself requires standing alone, even when others disagree.
You have to do what's best for you, even if nobody agrees with it. That's something that you have to do.
The implications go beyond Sanders himself. We may be witnessing a new paradigm where even late-round picks feel empowered to shape their destinations. This signals a fundamental shift in the NFL draft traditional power structure, historically dominated by teams. Now that we understand the bombshell nature of Newton's revelation and its broader impact, let's examine how each team's pursuit unfolded and why Sanders' strategic calculations were more sophisticated than initially realized. A team-by-team breakdown and strategic analysis reveal a complex web of organizational dynamics, quarterback development philosophies, and career trajectory planning, showing just how advanced modern player management has become. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens, whose interest was first reported by Adam Schefter and later confirmed by Newton. The Ravens, entering the 2025 NFL Draft, held 7 picks, including the 141st overall selection in the 5th round, which they considered ideal for high-ceiling prospects who could develop behind their established core. This wasn't only about filling roster gaps. It was about sustaining a perennial contender through strategic developmental selections. The Ravens' approach to quarterback growth is legendary in NFL circles. Under GM Eric Caste's philosophy of best player available with fit, Baltimore has produced stars like Joe Flacco and played a pivotal role in Lamar Jackson's rise from a 2018 first-rounder to 2-time MVP. Considering that Jackson posted a 2024 season with over 4,500 passing yards and 35 touchdowns, while only 28 years old, it's clear why the Ravens saw Sanders as a long-term investment rather than an immediate starter. Yet here's what makes Sanders' thinking so fascinating. Newton acknowledged that the Ravens' organizational excellence made Sanders' decision to reject them even more striking on the surface, given their proven quarterback development track record.
Now, this is where the perspective gets skewed, because you asked the question, why would Shedeur not want to go to Baltimore? For all the obvious reasons and all the optics that Alex Smith has stated. If any team has been on the cutting edge of saying we figured out the recipe of drafting and developing good players to play great and elite,
Newton recognized the Ravens' excellence while explaining Sanders' reasoning. The choice wasn't about disrespecting Baltimore. It was about understanding that the situation wouldn't provide the developmental path Sanders desired. Internal Ravens evaluations had Sanders ranked as their fourth quarterback on the board, behind consensus prospects like Cam Ward and Quinn Ewers, but ahead of raw athletes such as Jalen Milroe. The Ravens valued Sanders' potential, especially his pocket poise and intermediate accuracy, posting a 68.5% completion rate in 2024, but planned a 2 to 3 year developmental timeline, a timeline Sanders' camp found unacceptable. Communication between Sanders' camp and the Ravens highlighted professionalism on both sides. Sources report that around 2:28 p.m. on draft day, agent David Mulugeta's camp signaled no interest, citing Sanders' aversion to a multi-year backup role during Jackson's prime. This wasn't dramatic rejection. It was a respectful, business-driven decision. Moving to the Philadelphia Eagles, Newton detailed how the situation mirrored Baltimore, an elite, established quarterback commanding respect.
the second team, Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts has been nothing less than a model citizen. And of course, he's thinking to himself, like, you're talking about development. You're talking about preparing him to be.
The Eagles aspect of Newton's story is particularly compelling because it lacks the mainstream media corroboration that the Ravens' angle received. The Eagles entered the 2025 draft following a 12-5 season in 2024, with quarterback Jalen Hurts locked in via a 5-year, $255 million extension signed in 2023. At 26 years old, Hurts was the undisputed centerpiece, posting impressive 2024 stats: 3,900 passing yards, 28 TDs, 8 INTs, and 600 rushing yards with 12 scores. The Eagles' draft priorities, outlined by GM Hal Roseman in pre-draft pressers, focus on strengthening the trenches and secondary with 5 picks, including the 145th pick in the 5th round. The Eagles targeted edge rushers, quarterbacks, and offensive line depth. Quarterback was an urgent need given Hurts' durability and the presence of Kenny Pickett as a capable backup. But here's where Roseman's history matters. He has a record of drafting QBs for trade value, like the Carson Wentz selection in 2016, who was later flipped for draft assets. Could the Eagles have viewed Sanders as a high-upside developmental quarterback who could later be traded for assets? The lack of mainstream media confirmation for the Eagles' interest raises questions, but Newton's source confirmed they were one of 3 teams pursuing Sanders. Newton emphasized that both Baltimore and Philadelphia offered clear developmental opportunities, making Sanders' decisions to decline them even more remarkable.
I'd add, these are individuals that is a no-brainer.
Then came the third team in this unprecedented saga, the Cleveland Browns, where Sanders ultimately landed.
The third team was the Cleveland Browns. And this is what I will add to this. As a man in the United States of America, as a man in the world that we live in today, no matter what country, no matter what city, no matter what state, no matter what county, no matter what zip code you stay in, you have to do what's best for you, even.
The Brown situation is the most fascinating part of this story because it's where Sanders eventually went. GM Andrew Berry executed a minor but critical 5th-round move on April 26, 2025, swapping picks with the Seattle Seahawks to secure Sanders at number 144. The trade cost Cleveland a 6th-round pick, number 189, and a 2026 7th-rounder. Minimal assets for a quarterback with franchise potential. Barry's rationale for targeting Sanders was rooted in Cleveland's quarterback instability. Heading into the draft, the Browns' QB room was a mix of veterans and improving young talent. Following the disastrous end of the Deshaun Watson era, the Browns had signed 40-year-old Joe Flacco served as a bridge starter, and the Browns drafted Oregon's Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, but neither provided a long-term solution. What made Cleveland appealing to Sanders was a chance to compete. Unlike Baltimore and Philadelphia, where he would be hidden behind established stars, Cleveland offered a more direct path to playing time. The Browns' depth chart featured the aging Flacco, the inexperienced Gabriel, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, none of whom posed insurmountable obstacles for a talented young quarterback. Newton explained that Sanders' primary goal was simple. He wanted to actually play football, not just hold a clipboard.
Everybody in the NFL draft has this consistent thought. I want to go to a team that I can do what, Peggy?
Play.
I want to go to a team that I could do what, Peggy?
Play.
The timing of these communications highlights the sophistication of modern draft day operations. Newton's narrative indicates that all 3 teams were actively in play during the 5th round, with Sanders' camp making rapid-fire decisions as selections progressed. The window between picks 141 and 144 was roughly 20 to 30 minutes, during which agent David Mulligetta fielded multiple calls and communicated his clients' preferences. This kind of real-time negotiation demands exceptional preparation and clear decision-making criteria. Sanders and his camp had established their priorities. Immediate opportunity outweighed organizational prestige. This represents a major shift from traditional thinking, where young players are expected to be grateful for any chance with successful teams. The role of Deion Sanders in this process cannot be overstated. As Shedeur's father, mentor, and de facto career strategist, Deion wielded significant influence in shaping the draft decisions.
That is because Deion Sanders seems to have passed on some of his confidence to his son. And through many NFL sources, it's basically concluded that teams didn't choose Shedeur because maybe he was a little too confident. Maybe his father's a little too confident. And a couple of NFL teams' words, it felt like Shedeur was choosing.
His March 2025 comments about certain teams being off-limits had already indicated that the Sanders family would be selective regarding Shedeur's destination. Newton's framing of Sanders' decision-making as respectful rather than arrogant is key to understanding the broader narrative. The choice wasn't about disrespecting Baltimore or Philadelphia. It was about recognizing that those situations wouldn't provide the developmental opportunities Sanders was seeking. Reactions from NFL analysts were mixed but insightful. Some, like Alex Smith, called Sanders' decision short-sighted, arguing that learning from established stars and stable franchises would have been more beneficial than competing in Cleveland's chaotic environment. Others praised Sanders for betting on himself and taking control of his career path. As we'll see, the long-term implications of Sanders' unprecedented draft day maneuvering go far beyond his individual career, potentially reshaping how future prospects approach the draft and altering the power dynamics between players and organizations in ways we are only beginning to understand.
Sources also tell me this, Peg.
What's up?
Going back to draft day, there was a thought that Shedeur had. I want to go somewhere to prove myself, even if it comes at a cost of being undrafted.
No.
And as a man in this world that we live in, you have to make the best decision.
The aftermath and long-term effects. The immediate reaction to Cam Newton's September 17th podcast about Shedeur Sanders turning down multiple teams triggered a media firestorm, revealing deep philosophical divides about player agency, organizational authority, and the evolving power dynamics in professional football. But the true story lies in what this unprecedented situation uncovers about the future of the NFL draft process and player empowerment at all levels of the league. In the days following Newton's revelation, social media the discussion became a battleground of opinions, reflecting broader cultural tensions about entitlement, respect, and business acumen in professional sports. The story generated over 40,000 posts with hashtags like #ShedurSnubs and #BusinessDecision.
I think this is insane, right? Like, if this is true, I think this is crazy, right? At this point, you're in the 5th round. I understand you had higher hopes, but you've dropped to the 5th round, and you're thinking about being
with sentiment analysis showing a 55% pro-Sanders, 35% anti-Sanders, and 10% neutral split. This divide wasn't merely about football. It represented differing philosophies on how young professionals should approach career development. The pro-Sanders camp, led by voices like Newton himself, framed the choice as smart business acumen.
This situation, you want to go to an organization that is going to develop you, right? Here you have the Baltimore Ravens, the model of stability in the NFL. This regime's been together for how many decades now? And actually has a track record to develop quarterbacks.
Newton revealed that Sanders' commitment to proving himself was so strong that he was willing to risk going completely undrafted rather than accept a situation that didn't match his goals. Interview 1827-1856. This perspective positioned Sanders as a young man who understood his own value and was willing to bet on himself, even if it meant risking going undrafted entirely. His willingness to potentially forego an NFL opportunity to find the right fit demonstrates rare conviction among draft prospects, especially those who had already fallen from their projected draft position. On the other hand, critics like former quarterback Alex Smith viewed Sanders' decisions as fundamentally flawed.
To Shedeur Sanders will be this: stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. When you think about the Tom Brady's of the world, when you think about the Kurt Warners of the world, when you think about the Dak Prescotts of the world, when you think about the...
Smith argued that falling to the fifth round should have served as a reality check, prompting Sanders to adjust his expectations regarding immediate playing time. Interview 1927-1939. Smith's criticism reflects traditional NFL thinking. Struggling organizations like Cleveland are seen as inferior developmental opportunities compared to stable, successful franchises.
Ready, bro. Matter of fact, and this ain't even to Shedeur. Any young player, stay ready. Because just because one team think you're trash, you may be the missing piece or the treasure to another team.
He stressed that the Ravens represented the gold standard in organizational stability and quarterback development. Interview 1954, 2009. But Newton's reporting suggests that Sanders' decision-making was far more sophisticated than critics give credit for. The revelation that Sanders showed deep respect for established stars like Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts reframes the narrative from arrogance to strategic career planning. Rather than thinking he was too good for certain teams, Sanders recognized that his developmental path would differ depending on his landing spot. The role of agent David Mulligetta in coordinating these draft day communications cannot be understated. As a top agent known for aggressive client advocacy, having represented stars like Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts, Mulligetta's strategy focused on avoiding situations where Sanders would have been buried behind entrenched starters. This scenario reflects a larger trend toward more assertive player representation in professional sports. The timing of Newton's revelation, coming 3 days after Brown's 17-10 loss to Baltimore in Week 2, added another layer of intrigue. Sanders had spent that game on scout team duty, mimicking Lamar Jackson's scrambles in practice, while remaining inactive for the actual contest. Observers noted the irony. Sanders was preparing his new team to face the quarterback he had chosen not to back up. Newton, always a keen analyst, predicted that Sanders' opportunity in Cleveland might arrive sooner than expected, given the Browns' struggles and Joe Flacco's limitations. Interview 2121, 2141. As of September 20th, 2025, Sanders remained third on the Browns' depth chart, behind Joe Flacco and rookie Dillon Gabriel. His preseason performance had been impressive. 26 of 35 completions for 267 yards and 2 TDs across 3 games, with an 82.4 PFF grade, yet he had not seen regular season action. Critics argued he would have benefited more from learning behind an established star. However, Sanders' situation in Cleveland also validated his strategic thinking, with Flacco struggling to a 58% completion rate and 13 TDs through 2 games, and the Browns sitting at 0-2. Sanders' path to meaningful playing time appeared to be faster than it would have in Baltimore or Philadelphia. The long-term implications of Sanders' draft day decisions go far beyond his personal career. We may be witnessing the emergence of a new paradigm in NFL draft strategy, where even late-round prospects feel empowered to influence their destinations. This represents a fundamental shift from the traditional power structure, historically dominated by teams. From a business perspective, Sanders' approach makes considerable sense when examined through the lens of modern athlete career management. His 4-year, $4.2 million contract with Cleveland includes performance incentives in Sanders' 4-year, $4.2 million contract could be worth up to $1,500,000 for significant playing time. Money he would be unlikely to earn sitting behind Jackson or Hers. The financial opportunity cost of accepting a backup role with limited development potential could be substantial over the span of his career. NFL front offices have mixed reactions to this level of player empowerment. Some executives view it as a worrying trend that could complicate future drafts, while others see it as a natural evolution of player agency in a league with short careers and limited opportunities. The precedent set by Sanders may encourage other prospects to assert preferences for their destinations, particularly those with strong representation and family support. The influence of Deion Sanders throughout this process is inseparable from the broader narrative. His public statements about certain teams being off-limits and his dual role as father and advisor gave Shedeur a level of guidance most prospects lack. This family dynamic provides a blueprint for how future prospects with influential parents might approach the draft. Newton's advice to Sanders emphasized being prepared for any opportunity that might arise, drawing parallels to other late-round success stories. Interview 2400 Hours 01, 2400 Hours 21. The media's coverage of this story highlights broader issues with reporting complex narratives in modern sports. Newton's criticism of incomplete reporting, arguing that revealing only part of the truth is akin to lying, underscores the challenge of accurately portraying nuanced situations in an environment dominated by quick takes and viral content. Looking forward, Sanders' career trajectory will serve as a key test case for this draft strategy. If he eventually wins a starting role in Cleveland and becomes a successful NFL quarterback, it will validate prioritizing opportunity over stability. Conversely, if he struggles or fails to reach his potential, critics will have ammunition to argue that he should have accepted a developmental role with a more established organization. The implications for future draft classes are significant. We may see more prospects, especially those with strong representation and family support, attempting to influence their draft destinations using